Welcome everybody to the Chess Lab. Welcome to episode 2 of Endgame Mastery, the series where we bring you from an absolute noob to a complete beast of the endgames. This is of course overly dramatized, obviously. So let's keep going from where we left yesterday. I have some tabs open because I am monitoring my trading setups up there. And sorry if I'm a little bit distracted, but this is how we're going to do it. That's the only way I can do it. Okay. So we talked about the staircase and we kind of studied it. Then we did some exercises. And then we reached the stalemate alert, meaning you have to be careful about the stalemate. So let's see what the master that did this course is suggesting. So let's read this. Okay. So, a stalemate can occur when black has a lone king or several pieces. That's too much. I'm trying to lower my chair because I need to stay up. My back is curved, I'm a little bit, curving with my back. It's a problem I always had. Like if you look at me, it's not like pronounced. You may not even notice it, but it's there. It may be because of my feet. When I was a kid, my feet were a little bit like flat feet. I don't really have flat feet. They told me what I have. It's not flat feet. It's not pretty either. It's something ugly, but it's technically not that. I don't remember what it is though. And the problem is when I was a kid, it was never diagnosed to me. And so I never knew, but I had it, technically. And now that I'm an adult, it's difficult to do the operation to fix it because the bones are like strengthened. So I have to find some solutions to that. Because now that I go to the gym, having the back like that is a little bit of an issue. And the gym helps with that, but my lifestyle here is not ideal. I should have a standing desk perhaps. So okay, let's do it like that. I lower the chair to force myself to stay up a little bit. It requires much more energy, especially from somebody that is not used to it. But let's go. Okay, sorry guys for this departure. I don't know, I just invented a word, I guess. Okay, so a stalemate can occur in this position here, as you can see, when black has a lone king or several pieces. In this position, a close look tells us that none of black's pieces can legally move. Any move of the e1 bishop hangs the king to rook takes a1, and you can't hang your king, it's illegal. Any move of the knight hangs the king to bishop takes a1, same thing. The pawn is blocked by its white counterpart and can't move, and black's king can't move to a2 due to the queen or to b1 due to the king. So you guys take a second to let this position sink in while I take care of my trades here. Okay. Perfect. I closed the trade. I lost around 75 cents. Don't gamble. I do dollar trading. If I lose $1. That's the most I can lose each trade. So I'm learning even there. So chill. Okay. However, So you look at the position, there are no moves for the black pieces, the black king, the black pawn is blocked, so what's going on? Let's see. However, at the moment, black's king isn't under attack, which means the game will be declared drawn by stalemate since you are never allowed to make an illegal move. Remember, let me do this, let me actually raise the chair so that my legs are kind of decent, and let me stay like this. Remember, the differences between checkmate and stalemate. In the case of a checkmate, the enemy king is in check and can't escape capture. So I'll read that again, because now that I am assuming a posture that I am not used to, which is a correct human posture, I guess, I have to focus on that. I'm not really focusing on what I'm reading. So you guys will excuse me. It's like my IQ dropped by 5 points. Now you're probably saying, well, 5 points is not a lot, but what if you have an IQ of 10 to begin with? Then that's 50%. So it dropped by a lot. So remember, the difference between checkmate and stalemate. In the case of a checkmate, the enemy king is in check and can't escape capture. Okay, this is good. In the case of a stalemate, the enemy king is not attacked. He has no legal move, and thus the game is drawn, because a player can't be forced to do something illegal. Okay, so this is clear. Let's go. I will click this just to make sure that the variation is checked. And by the way, if you are thinking we are going slow, we are already at, if we discount this variation I just did, we are at 20 lines out of like 500. So in 30 days, if we keep this pace, the course is done. And for most of you watching, you need like half of it. For me, 3/4. Like we are already, like in a month this is done. And you basically become an endgame maestro. Right? Maybe not, that's not so easy, but you improve a lot. So let's catch up here. Okay, stalemate alert number 3. I have to stay up. In this position, meanwhile, black does not draw by stalemate because he has a legal move. A5, which he must play, which would be met by queen takes b2 checkmate, or bishop takes b2 checkmate, queen a3 checkmate, or rook takes e1 checkmate. So that's a pretty tough line. So you guys, if you have material left in this type of positions, is actually worst. That's why sometimes you see these masters, or like Eric Rosen, right, comes to mind, that just try to sacrifice everything, like the lateral pawns or something, because he knows that's the only way to create some chances of a stalemate if he's in a worse position. So stalemate alert 4. This is similar to stalemate alert 2, but this time black's king is under direct attack by the c3 bishop. Since king a1 and king b1 both illegally place the king on an attacked square, and since bishop takes c3 isn't legal, since it allows rook takes a1, the game ends with checkmate and a white victory. It is very important to know that a stalemate is. It's very important to know what a stalemate is. When you are winning the game, you want to avoid falling for one and tossing your win into the garbage. However, when you are the weaker side, being aware of possible stalemate swindles will occasionally save you a precious half point. True. Useful advice. Mastering the overkill checkmates means you have also become acutely aware of stalemate disasters. Okay, all very fair. Yeah, my back is a mess. Very nice. It's a good problem to have, you know, your back is slightly curved. There are worse problems to have. Okay, stalemate alert 5. This example illustrates a nice blend of basic mate strategy with a stalemate spider sense. Queen g7. This is the move that best fits in with our endgame philosophy. Trap the king on the back rank and mate will surely follow. Another move that fits in with this concept is queen c7, trapping the black king when king f8, king e6, this kind of resembles the rook checkmate. If you had a rook here, it will kind of be similar. If the king goes back, you checkmate it. If the king moves forward, you follow it, you follow it, you follow it. Then they have to come back and then you checkmate. But okay, here there is a queen, so there is one less move to mate. And this is mate. Notice how nice and simple these moves are. But what about, if we go from the very first position, what about queen to f6? This seems effective, but there is one problem. The game suddenly is drawn due to stalemate. That's right. Black has no legal moves because he is not allowed to move his king into check. But okay, let's go back to the game. Here there is queen g7, the king is forced to d8, forced, as the author points out, and queen d7 is checkmate. There are other like 3 checkmates in one, but this is very logical. This is probably what most players would have played. So we go here, not here, that would be stalemate. We could also go here, that's probably an alternative, but we go here, we box it in, and then there are like 3 checkmates here, but let's just checkmate here. Okay, now let's go to summing up, and then we'll do some puzzles. When it comes to the puzzles, guys, feel free to like stop the video, you know, and all these things. I'm just gonna go because they're probably very simple, but you guys take your time. If you need it, if you're more advanced, of course, you can just follow the video. Summing up. In the endgame, the enemy king, I have to, it's so difficult. It takes a lot of strength from many muscles that I probably never use because I stay down like this. Damn, now that I'm doing it is a lot. Wow, I have to, bro. In the endgame, the enemy king can rarely be mated in the middle of the board. You almost always want to chase it to one of the 4 sides or to a corner. Okay. The staircase maneuver is the easiest way to make use of a lopsided material count, such as the 2 queens versus long king, queen and rook versus long king, or 2 rooks versus long king. So, you box the king, doesn't matter where, but you move it to a border, and then you do that by the meaning of the staircase. Number 3. The box is a technique that enables you to limit the enemy king's space. As you shrink the box, you force his king to eventually retreat to the side of the board, where you will finally be able to mate it. Fantastic. If you are left with king and queen versus long king, or king and rook versus long king, you can't mate with the major piece alone. You will need to use both your major piece and king to finish the enemy off. Watch out for stalemates. There is nothing worse than setting your opponent up for the killing blow, then botching the whole thing to a draw by overlooking that you have stalemated his king. In situations where stalemates might be possible, for example, the king has limited squares to move to, always take a moment before moving and ask, when I play this move, will his king have a legal square to go to? And believe it or not, this is just my input, I still do this. Like, to this day, I do this. And I'm 1970 FIDE. You know? So you never really stop doing this. It's a good practice. I don't know if grandmasters do it, but perhaps some grandmasters do that. Okay, so here I'm not going to click here because that will show me the solution. I'm going to solve the puzzles. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 puzzles and final thoughts. So let's try to solve these 5 puzzles. Okay, so let's go. Solve. White has a forced mate in 4. Okay, this is very, very interesting. Mate in 4, huh? Okay. So there are a couple of ways to do it. The first thing that came to my mind, I can't draw arrows here, is to play rook f3. And if rook f3 came to your mind, is a fine move. And it may be the best move. I still haven't calculated correctly, even though I think the best move is another one. And you know, rook f3 boxes the king in, because all of a sudden the king can't escape the f file. But of course, by playing rook f3, you are setting up the staircase, rook g2, check, then the king moves, and then rook h3, checkmate. But there is the king to h3, so you would have to play rook f3, then rook g2, then king h2, then rook to h3. And that may as well be the best move. For example, let's calculate rook f3, king g6, rook g2, king h5, king h2, and then there's checkmate. That works. That works perfectly. And after rook f3, if the king goes to the h file, you can play rook g3. The king goes, again, it moves because it can, and then you play king g2 checkmate. Another move that comes to mind is rook b6, with the idea rook a2, rook a7, rook b8. So for example, rook b6, king f7, rook a2, king e7, rook to a7 check, king to d8, and rook to b8 is checkmate. So here I don't know what the computer wants. Rook f3, what's the problem with rook f3? Rook f3, the king goes to the 6th rank. I play king g2, sorry, rook g2. And the king does whatever, and then I play king h2, and there's not much else to say. So let's try to count the moves. Rook b6, rook a2, rook a7, rook b8 is 4 moves, 1, 2, 3, 4. Whereas rook f3, rook g2, 2 moves, is 4 moves in any case. So I'm gonna try to play like rook f3 simply because it's the first move that came to mind. Is an alternative, it's fine. So let's try to play rook b6. That's correct. Here we go. Yeah, rook b6 is perhaps more in line with the exercise because your king is not in the way. Your king is not in the way. And so you just deliver the check. But you have to be careful that this is checkmate, because if the king went here, you would have to waste another move to move your rook here to set up checkmate. The king then goes here, you go here, and then it's going to be checkmate. But in this case, it's checkmate immediately. So let's see if rook f3 is given as an alternative. So rook b6. And also, this is why in these type of problems and puzzles, see how I was like this and now I'm like this? I was like this, look at the webcam, I was like this, I should be like this. Okay. I pushed my feet a little bit behind the chair, like under my ass. So now I'm kind of forced to stay like this. Okay. As I was saying, you guys don't worry too much about the... also, my microphone is very away. Hopefully you guys are hearing correctly. Anyways, don't worry too much about the precise move you make. What matters is that you get the logic. In this puzzle here, it was very important to understand the logic behind the staircase, obviously. And it's funny because I identified these 2 moves, okay? And look at these comments. Rook b6. White makes use of the staircase to force mate in 4. This move traps black's king on its 2nd rank. An alternative solution is, look at that, rook f3, which is exactly the move that I wanted to play. And after king g6, rook g2 check, king h6, rook f4 is also possible, but if you want to be annoying, you can also play king h2 and there is no way to stop rook h3. But rook f4 is of course playable, and here king h7 is shown. Of course, if king h5, your rook on h4 is supported by the king. That's the point. And rook h4 checkmate. So okay, rook b6, king f7, rook a2. As you can see, the staircase is in place. This sets up a staircase and also makes both rooks safe from attack by placing them as far from the enemy king as possible. King e7, rook a7, a perfect staircase. One rook stops the enemy king from stepping up to its 3rd rank, while the other rook forces the king back to the vulnerable 1st rank. King d8, rook b8 is checkmate. Okay, next variation. It is wise to play rook c7, trapping the enemy king on its back rank. Oh, so he's asking, is it wise to play rook c7? Hopefully you guys answered no. Hopefully you guys answer no, because if you play rook c7, it's true that you are creating the tighten box you can, but this is also stalemate, remember. Now I have no idea what the right move is. There are a couple of possibilities here that are very good and logical. The first move, you have to be careful, is not stalemate, but is queen g5. The reason why queen g5 is an excellent move is because, and guys, of course, there are 3 trillion ways to win this. 3 trillions. Even like mate in 2, there are a bunch. But here's the thing. If you play queen, not queen g5, that will be stalemate, but if you, queen g6, if you play queen g5, you are boxing the king in, right? That makes a lot of sense, and you're also setting up this staircase. So this is the concept of the box and the concept of the staircase. And after the queen goes here, the king is forced here, and then you finish the ladder. So that makes a lot of sense, the staircase. However, another move that makes a lot of sense is rook c1, which puts the rook on the furthest square away, ready to go rook h1, or queen g1 that sets up rook h2. So there are a trillion ways. I'm gonna go with queen to g5, simply because, is alternative. This is the problem with chessable, right? There are many moves that wins, and you just have to figure out. I'm gonna go with rook c1, that's the second I thought. Yeah, and now you just finish it off. Beautiful. There are many alternatives, guys. Again, if you're a beginner, you played another move, don't worry. For example, in the very first position, if you thought about what about rook g4, what about queen g4? Absolutely, yeah, it's mate in 2. But again, if you play queen g4, you have to understand is to create the staircase, right? Rook c1 is to create the staircase. Okay, that's just why you do it. Okay, so rook c1, no. That's the answer to the question. Though rook c7 seems very strong, I have to get used to it. It's fine. Though rook c7 seems very strong, you are taking the h7 square away from the defending king, while the queen is depriving the black monarch of g7 and g8. g7 and g8. This means it doesn't have any legal moves, and a draw by stalemate results. Instead, the simple rook c1 or rook c3, that's another good move to create the staircase. So again, if you thought about this is fine. Rook c4, rook c5, also mate on the h file. While queen b7, which is also a very nice move that I didn't notice, followed by rook c8, also does the job. So as you can see, there are really multiple ways you can do it. Whatever you choose, it's fine. What matters is you understand this concept of the stair. So the king goes to h7, and as we saw, is quick and painless. I want to make sure you guys understand why was in the previous test the move that it was the right move, and why here is rook c1. I guess the point is to be as coherent as possible. Despite there are many moves and there are many ways to even follow the ladder, the staircase, here by playing rook c1 you are creating the furthest away staircase possible. And technically queen b7 kind of achieves the same, but not really, because you are like a little bit closer to the king compared to this. So rook c1 is really the most in line. I tried queen g5 because it's also the box concept, but rook c1 is probably the most in line. But it doesn't matter. Okay, let's keep going. Trap the enemy king in the smallest box possible. Okay, so first of all, the king has a bunch of squares here to go. Oh, I can draw arrows. Oh, I didn't know that. So we want to create a box, and the move that comes to mind is quite simply a rook to e4. There are other ways to do it, like you can go here, and if the king goes here, you go here, and then you follow it and you try to close it, and if the king goes here, for example, you go here. If the king goes here, you can go here. But of course, this is what the computer wants, because you just do the box, right? I'm just adding my inputs here for you guys if you find them useful. So rook e4. This immediately traps the black king in a box whose borders are from a4 to e4. to e8. Once you learn to recognize and create such boxes, mating with a king and rook versus king will prove easy. Okay, let's keep going. Test 4. There are 6. Okay. How do you finish black off? How do you finish black off? Okay, so here is the thing. If you move the king, they're not gonna go to the corner, making your life easy. If you go towards the king, they're gonna escape, and then it's gonna be a little bit of a pain. So what you want to do is you want to move this rook along this side. Well, not here probably, because then they go here and you don't have checkmate. So this move is good, this move is good, this move is good, any of these moves are good. I don't remember what they recommend. They probably recommended something like rook g7, like staying the further away. If you go here and they go here is checkmate. Yep, here we go. Of course, any of these moves were fine. And now that they go to the corner, you follow them, they have to come out, and now you checkmate. Again, he's gonna show many alternatives, obviously. So rook g7, to mate, you need black's king standing in front of yours. However, if you play king b6, the variation I showed you, he skips away with king c8. While the tempting rook b7 check, king a8, king b6 is a draw by stalemate. It's like the box thing is a rationalization to make your life easier, but as you can see, if you push it to the extreme without thinking, you're just gonna stalemate. So don't be stupid, okay? Just use your logic. White just wants to give black the move, so he will step in front of white's king. So let's go back here, rook g7. There are many ways to do this. Rook g7, rook f7, rook e7, as shown. Though one nice alternative is rook h8 check, king a7, rook g8. Ah, very nice. Any rook move along the back rank from h8 to c8 will serve the same purpose, which is to force black's king to commit suicide by stepping in front of white's king. This is forced rook a8 mate. Note that in the very first position, rook d7 isn't a good idea, since king c8 stops rook d8. This is something that I told you guys. Okay, so again, rook g7, king a8, on king c8, there is obviously checkmate, that's the point. So king a8, king b6, now there is no rook here, so the king has the b8 square, king b8, and now rook g8 is checkmate. Okay, test number 5. I like this line. Can white safely take the pawn on f6 with his queen? Should he do so? Well, what do you guys think? Should white take the pawn or not? Hopefully you answer correctly. Is the same example as before? Of course not, because if you take it, it's a stalemate. So what I will personally do in this position is just create the box with queen c7, the king moves here, then I'm probably gonna go here to h7, but then they can move the pawn, okay, but then I just follow with the king and checkmate them. Because if you take the pawn, it's stalemate because they have no moves, but once you allow their pawn to move, you have no problems of stalemate, so I will just go here. Okay. Box concept. Can white safely take the pawn on f6? Should he do it? Taking the pawn is a horrible blunder, since a stalemate occurs after queen takes f6. Sticking to our trap the enemy king on the side of the board rule via queen c7 is simplest and safest. Of course, there are other ways to do it, but just stick to that. I just want you guys to give you my input once again. If you play queen to e3, they can escape through f7, and of course you are completely winning, but then it becomes a little bit annoying. Okay, last test. It's mate in 1. Can you find it? Of course, guys, you can take your time. Obviously, the king here cannot escape through z7, assuming before a there is z. You just checkmate them, right? Rook g8. If you know the difference between checkmate and stalemate, the right move is obvious. However, if you don't know the difference, then rook b7. might prove attractive. Sadly, this creates a stalemate and a draw. If you didn't get this right, please go back and study the material under stalemate alert. Okay, we got it right. So let's go out. And could you guys see it correctly? I don't think you could. Well, hopefully you guys can follow through my explanation. Also, I'm reading everything, so it's fine. Okay, final thoughts. So, you have learned to play chess. Yes, well. Oh, he didn't say you learned how to play chess. Well, he just said you learned how to play chess. I kind of know the rules. Sometimes en passant is confusing, and sometimes, you know, if, let's say you want to long castle, and the bishop is looking at b1, you're like, can I long castle or not? And it's like, you can, but it's weird. Okay, anyways. So you have learned to play chess, let's say kind of. You have played a bunch of games online or with friends face-to-face. Yeah, that I can say. You have picked up an opening idea or two by glancing in a chess book. Well, we don't talk about that. And you have also begun to recognize a few tactical tricks. Yeah, when they do it on me. Often by painful experience, exactly. Now, having carefully gone over this chapter, you are able to finish off an opponent if you reach an overkill endgame situation. Let's go, man. Let's go. You should be proud of yourself if you made it this far. It's time to put aside this book and continue to gain valuable over-the-board experience by crossing swords with players equal to or a bit better than yourself. If money is available, you can accelerate your progress by taking lessons. Of course, going over tactical quizzes is always a great idea. Books featuring mates in 1, 2, and 3, plus white to play and win tactical puzzles are plentiful and very useful. Or study part 2, which will put you one step ahead of your expected endgame IQ, and then put aside this book and follow the earlier advice. In either case, once you feel you have improved and reached a higher rating skill level, it will be time to crack open this book anew and move on to the next series of endgame lessons. But little did he know, yeah, you can't, sorry guys, you can't see this correctly. Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, now it doesn't matter, but it will matter later. What if I do this? Oh, but you can't see the board. Well, never mind. It's not a problem, guys. So we finished the first chapter. Look at that, 28 out of 28. This is monumental. So, you guys learned well? Hopefully. And by the way, guys, if you are as advanced as I am or around my level, you may think I'm going slow and all these things, but like, there is no rush. I'm also so unused to endgames, it's fine to kind of slowly flow into it, you know, by starting this simple. And already there were some insights, you know, this staircase thing, of course I know how to checkmate with those set of pieces, but still it was nice to get the endgame logic starting, because endgame logic and what I've experienced even on an extremely high level, I'm talking when I played against a 2100 extremely strong candidate master, FIDE over the board, is a lot about geometry of pieces. So is what I call the endgame geometry, right? Piece geometry in the endgame. It's like, it's something that you get if you start to see them a lot. It's like opening concepts that you see in an opening and you recall in another. You can get it only once you start to study quite a bit. So even such simple puzzles, in my opinion, are very valuable to your brain. But anyways, let's finally go to part 2, endgames for class E, between 1000 and 1100. Okay, let's go. Introduction. I'm very curious because, okay, I get it, the very beginning is like you want to make sure you're able to checkmate with those basic pieces, but I'm very curious to see what's here now. Oops. My first rating was 1068. Aside from the overkill mates, see part 1, I knew nothing at all about endgames. This didn't seem to affect me too much because I lost the vast majority of my games rather quickly and rarely had need of any endgame skills at all. However, now, as an international master, I'm very aware of the plight of the beginning tournament player and can't allow the level of total endgame ignorance I possessed when I was a Class E neophyte to carry over to my students. Instead, I always demand that they learn a few endgame basics that, though easy to absorb, will create a simple but highly useful foundation for later moves up the rating ladder. Okay, logical. Here in part 2, you'll learn what material advantages do and don't win, and you'll take your first step into the world of serious endgame knowledge. You'll develop an appreciation for the powers of the king, the mysteries of the opposition, and the drawing proclivities of the rook pawns. Okay. The rook pawns will be the pawn on the H file and the pawn on the A file. Sound daunting? It's all far easier to understand than you might imagine, and a couple hours effort will make you the master of this extremely important material. I can't wait for that. Let's go. Let's go. So let's mark this as a view. Perfect. What can or cannot mate against Lone King? Let's see. This is actually extremely advanced stuff if you look at it the right way, because you can also try to, like, in a late stage middle game, you know, sacrifice something perhaps. Okay, when you reach a position where your opponent has lost everything but his king, which of course can't be captured, it's a must to know what material you'll need to force a checkmate. On the other hand, you can save many poor positions by leaving your opponent with an insufficient amount of material. On the other hand, you can save many poor positions by leaving your opponent with an insufficient amount of mating material when you are the one with the Lone King. Clearly, a knowledge of what can or cannot mate versus a Lone King is extremely important. So let's try to go through the knowledge here. So the queen alone can mate. The two rooks, they can. The rook alone, it can. The two bishops alone, they can. Bishop and knight, they can. So a bishop and a knight alone can checkmate the king. This is something that I myself wasn't sure about, by the way. So good to know. Okay, a bishop and a knight can mate. Well, that's crazy. A bishop and a knight alone? That's crazy. Pawn cannot. We are talking about just one pawn and a king against a king, unless it can successfully promote, of course. But, you know, keep in mind those positions of stalemate, you know, at the end, like your king is here, your pawn is here, and their king is here. It's stalemate. And if it's then to move, of course. Knight, so the bishop alone cannot, the knight alone cannot, the two knights alone, they cannot. We know about that crazy position when there is one random pawn somewhere, but we're not talking about that. We have already seen in part 1 that a king and a rook, or more, versus a lone king mates easily. Thus, the first 3 items on our list need no comment. So we're talking about queen, two rooks, and rook. If you are not 100% sure that you can make in those situations, sorry, I hit my microphone, go back and master those endgames. Two bishops is too complex for this section, but will be examined later in the book. Though considering your specific target rating, you might find that you will never have a need to learn it. I think I've never faced two bishops. Like in my experience, I never had to mate with two bishops, or the opponent had to mate me with two bishops. I think. I'm talking over the board. But perhaps even online. Bishop and knight might never occur in your whole chess lifetime and is far too difficult to waste your precious study time on. In other words, this book won't examine bishop and knight versus king at all. The basics of a lone pawn will be presented here in part 2, and a deeper knowledge of king and pawn versus king will be presented in parts 3 and 4. And that's already going to be super useful for me. Bishop and knight are said facts, but you simply can't mate your opponent with king and minor piece versus king, even if he is trying to help you. This leaves us with the final item on the list, 2 knights versus a lone king. 2 knights versus a lone king. The odd case of 2 knights versus king is the most frustrating and unfair situation on our list. 2 pieces up and white can't win against proper defense. How is that possible? Let's take a look at this position here. The first thing that must be understood is that white only has a chance to deliver mate in this endgame if black's king blunders into a mate in 1. Okay, 2 knights and king. Sorry, I have to reread this because I was distracted thinking about trading, sorry. The first thing that must be understood is that white only has a chance to deliver mate in this endgame if black's king blunders into a mate in 1. So is it possible? Yeah, if here the black king plays king h8, you play king f7 checkmate. But if they play king f8, you're good. So is it possible though? Oh, it's possible technically. This is huge because it can happen in a very low time situation. You can push them through the side and then try the trick. Interesting. But again, these are things that never happen, so it doesn't matter too much. The thing is, these things are so rare, even if it happens, like it's okay to miss it. Because basically you missed an opportunity to win and instead you drew, so you lost half a point. But this happened like once out of 3,000 games, so it literally doesn't matter. Even if you miss it, like doesn't matter. In general, almost all self-mates in this endgame occur in the corner, so if black's king has been heard in that direction, he needs to show a bit of care. King f8. In the current position, white has correctly chased black's king to the side of the board and has even driven him near the dangerous corner square. Black is in check by the f6 knight and only has 2 legal moves. We are talking about this position here. If he moves to the poison square on h8, he'll be mated by knight f7. However, if he avoids it with king f8, then white will never be able to force mate. In other words, black can only get mated if he blunders. That's, of course, much better than the impossible situations, but it's still interesting. Useful advice. When defending a knight versus 2 knights endgame, as long as you avoid a1, a8, h1 or h8, any corner square, you'll draw the game. Okay, fantastic. That's a nice rationale. Okay, it's time to go to h8. Just kidding. f8. We are safe. Okay. Minor piece versus queen bishop. Oh, so it's funny because this is already quite complex. Like this is no joke. King g6, queen e8 check, threatening the king and bishop at the same time. King g7, king f5, tightening the box until mate occurs. Bishop a3, because of course if you move the king, the queen just takes your bishop, even though if the king goes to h7 and you take the bishop, is stalemate. So that's interesting. That's very interesting. But I guess you have queen g6, king h8, king f6. But then bishop e7. But you just ignore it, you go to f7. Okay. It's complicated, it's complex. Okay, bishop a3, queen g6 check, king h8, on king f8, king e6, you're gonna mate on f7 because the king has no moves, but is not stalemate. If we flip it, that's basically the stalemate position we already looked at, remember, but the bishop exists, so it's not stalemate because they can move the bishop, and then they get mated on f7. Followed by queen f7, exactly. So king h8, and again, all he has to do is king to e6, king f7. King e6, bishop e7, king f7 followed by this, okay, the comment should have been here. So bishop e7, king f7, not falling for king takes c7, and this is stalemate obviously. So it's like the bishop is useful for you, if you're black in this case, to avoid stalemate. So the bishop and the dark squares to you don't exist. You're just following on the light squares and you're mating. Bishop f8, please take my bishop. Of course black is on top, is on to the stalemate and will avoid touching white's bishop. Queen g8 mate. Black won by threatening the endgame. By treating the endgame as a king and queen versus lone queen endgame, the bishop was more ghost than threat, and in some cases its presence helped black avoid stalemate, exactly. Okay, so let's try to do this. So, check here, yes, to force king g7. Now we come close. Now we check them. If they go here, we go for that, and now we do the maneuver. There is no stalemate because of their bishop. But did I skip the chapter? Oh, I skipped the chapter. Sorry, I skipped the line. So a1 equals queen. But there is a comment above. Okay, sorry. Inexperienced players occasionally think that a lone minor piece, for example the bishop or knight, might be able to put up some resistance versus a lone queen. Let me assure you that nothing could be further from the truth. We will explore both possibilities, bishop against queen and knight against queen, and demonstrate beyond any shadow of a doubt that the poor minor piece is completely outgunned. Bishop versus queen is a no contest. One poor bishop can't hope to face off against a mighty queen. It's funny because if I'm not mistaken, in history, but even today, the queen of the United Kingdom, the Queen of England, or the King of England, I think the King of England, but when the queen was the queen, I think it was the queen, or is the king? Maybe I'm saying something crazy, but like, is the head of the Anglican Church. Can it only be the king, or it can also be the queen? Like, when Queen Elizabeth was in charge, was she also the head of the Anglican Church? Because if that's the case, then, or maybe it can only be the king, I don't know. Because he's a male, but I have no idea. But if it was the queen, the head of the Anglican Church, then it's funny that the bishop can do nothing against the queen, you know? That's pretty funny. But okay, if there is the king, there's the king. Anyways, so a1 equals queen, it is important that black promote his pawn immediately, else white will prevent it by bishop g7. Black should treat a queen versus bishop situation in the same way as a king and queen versus lone king. The only difference, you must be a bit careful about stepping onto the color squares controlled by the bishop. Useful advice. In a queen versus dark square bishop endgame, stay on light squares as often as possible and the bishop becomes a non-entity. So for example, bishop d6, king d3, the game can't be won without help from the king. King f5, queen f1 check, black will patiently kick the enemy king around a bit and, after some prodding, make it give ground to black's monarch. King e5, queen e2, black's queen continues to torment white's king, king f5, queen h5 check, finally pushing the enemy king back. Yeah, if you go to f4, queen h2 picks up the bishop. This is some useful geometry again. So king f6, king e4, black's king will always step closer to white's whenever it's possible to do so. Bishop f8, trying not to move the bishop too far from its king, since that could easily lead to loss. For example, if bishop g3, queen f3 snares the adventurous bishop. Other tries are certainly no better. Bishop c7, check, king e7, king d5, it's pretty brutal here. Bishop d8, check, king e8, king e6, and mate follows to the next move. Instead, if you try bishop e7, queen h6, king here, and black's progress is obvious. Yep. So bishop f8 was tried, but now queen e5, the box, king g6, queen e8, and this transposes to the variation we just saw. King g7, king f5, bishop a3, queen g6. We saw this previously because I made the mistake of skipping, and it's checkmate. Noticing how we completely ignore the bishop, with the exception of we don't go on its colored squares. But besides that, we ignore it. Is there gonna be some puzzles here? Yeah, there's gonna be 5 puzzles. Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm not skipping anything. Minor piece versus queen and knight. Perfect. Am I skipping again? Sorry. So there is minor piece versus queen bishop, and then there is minor piece versus queen knight. But I'm doing the right order this time, so okay, let's go. As with queen versus bishop, queen versus knight is a fairly simple win, but here the knight's strange leaping powers create some nasty folding possibilities. So for example, king to h2, bringing the king over to help its queen, but not falling for the horrific king to g2, which would blunder knight f4 check, when white's queen and king are forked, as you can see by the knight. Remember, a knight can be very tricky. If you're not paying attention, it can fork and win a queen, so be careful. Okay, fair enough. Let me fix a little bit my trading scenario here. What the frick is going on? How do I delete this? Like this? Perfect. I don't know where the tool is to delete the... Okay, sorry guys, but that's how you do it. Okay, so we want to get closer, but we have to do it like this. If we do it like this, we blunder. So let's go here, that's good. And now the big line. Okay. Let's go. We still have how much time? I still have 1 hour, perhaps. So today we move strong today. Minor piece versus queen and knight. Okay, part 2. As with queen versus bishop, queen versus knight is fairly simple win. Okay, this is the same. Let's keep going with the lines. So king e6, queen d4. The queen moves up and takes command of a few more squares. White's king and queen will continually do this so that slowly but surely the enemy king will be pushed to this side of the board. Useful advice. In this endgame, the stronger side's plan is easy. Push the enemy king to the side of the board and mate it. However, make sure you don't let the knight fork your king and queen. 97. Tricky move. A trick. Do you see what black is hoping for? Of course. Queen e4 check. Again, white's on guard and does not fall for king g3. Look at the nasty. Knight f5 check when the pesky knight has saved the day. This is something, by the way, that anyone can fall for, like even grandmasters, so that's extremely tricky. Like, if this was a puzzle, I could have just fallen for it. I could have just played king g3, you know, easy. That's very tricky. So if you are a beginner, don't worry if you blunder this in the beginning, like, it's very normal. So, okay, because the knight moves in very unusual ways, and, okay, usually, okay, the knight is a tricky piece, but when you play chess from the very beginning position, in the end of the day, they move forward towards the center. And if they start to go laterally, they usually just fades into the shadows. But in an endgame, they can move anywhere and it may be good. So it's even trickier in the endgame, in my opinion at least. So queen e4 check, not falling for the trap, king f6, king g3, now you can come closer because if the knight check, the queen is not hanging. White's king has to get as close to black's king as possible. Knight g6, trying to control some squares. King g4, knight e5. So here the threat was queen f5 followed by king g5. Okay, so basically in this position the threat is to check and go here, logical. So knight h5, king h5. As you can see, the king doesn't have that many squares. King e6, the only way to not retreat the knight, but this also pins the knight. White's king and queen are surrounding black's king and knight. Soon he'll be forced to step back to the fatal sidelines. On knight d7, white will continue the squeeze with queen c6 check. And, you know, the fact that they have a piece, because if they didn't have a piece, they could just escape to e5. But if they escape to e5 here, you just grab the knight, and that's a very easy win from there. So they have to go closer to the corner by trying to saving the knight. And here you just play king g5 and you're good to go. Not king g6 though, as knight e5, the queen is dead. But you just go king g5, here there are no checks. And if they move the knight, they get checked again, or perhaps even they lose the knight, so they have to be very careful. And yeah, you're just doing fantastically. So king e6 instead, now king g5, king d6, king f5, knight goes back, queen d4 check, king e7. If they go to c6, that looks a little bit more resilient. This helps the king really go in, and after knight c5, king e7, there is this geometry where the king and knights are the further that they can be, because the knight takes 4 moves to check the king again. 1, 2, 3, well, 3 moves, I guess. King b5, but now the king come closer, and again, the squeeze just continues forever. Okay, so king g5, king d6, king f5, knight d7, queen d4, the king goes to e7, queen d5. Patiently taking more squares away from black pieces. Though queen b4, queen f7, queen b7, king e7, queen c7, king e8, king e6, knight f8, king d6 is even faster, our basic box plan will make your life easier by offering a constant and highly effective idea to follow. So we just box them in. Knight f8, and not knight f6, because queen e6 and the knight is lost. So knight f8, they start to be around out of squares. Queen c5 check, king f7, if you go to d7 or king d8, there is queen f8, winning the knight, so king f7, queen c7 check, look at that, squeeze, king e8, black king has finally been pushed back to the side of the board, so you play king f6, and again, this will be stalemate. Well, not really, it can't really be stalemate, because this piece can always move, and there cannot be a pawn here on f8. So yeah, no stalemate. But if that was a white piece, let's say a white knight, that will be stalemate. Okay. Knight d7. Now king e6. The idea behind king f6 is to threaten queen e7 checkmate. So knight d7, king e6, knight f8, king d6. There are no more checks, and queen e7 mate is still a threat. The noose is tightening around black's neck. I am so... I have to stay like this. Okay, knight g6, trying his best to survive, covering the e7 square and giving the black king a place to run on f8, but queen g7. A complete killer that hits the knight and also takes away the f8 square from black's king. The knight is hanging, but any knight move allows queen e7 mate. This only leaves one other choice, which is king d8, but this allows queen d7 checkmate. As we saw, to safely win this endgame you should always be on the lookout for knight's forks, use your king and queen as a team, chase the enemy king to the side of the board, be patient. And perhaps the fourth point, guys, is my input here is the most important. If you are a beginner studying these endgames, you may think that you have to some sort prove something to somebody. You have to prove nothing to nobody. You have to be the most efficient. You have to, even when you're playing, let's say you have 10 minutes on the clock, you're playing in real life over the board against another beginner, and you are like, and someone is watching this endgame, because usually when there are less pieces, for the human brain is easier to understand, and so people in a playing hall, they tend to gather around, even if it's an obvious endgame, right? It's just a thing that people do. I do it myself. It's not a criticism. It's just a fact. And you may feel pressure. You may feel like, oh, I have to do it fast. If I don't move very fast, people are gonna think I'm stupid. No one thinks that. They're just chilling there. So take your time. Take your sweet 20-30 seconds each move. Just make sure you don't lose on time. That's the only thing you have to be careful of. And just take your time, okay? Don't rush it. What matters in the end is the result. Everyone will only always remember the result. No one will care if you take time, that doesn't matter. The result is the only thing that matters. So take your time. Okay, so queen d7 checkmate. Be patient. As your queen and king cut off more and more of the board, he'll eventually be forced to give ground and round for the sidelines, which is just where you want him. Okay. Okay, so understanding the king, part 1, part 2, opposition, rook pawn, summing up, and then there is the tests, and then the final thoughts. Okay, because I have to go make myself dinner, but I guess I'll finish this and then I'll go make myself dinner. Okay, understanding the king number 1, let's go. Oh god. Let's go. Players that are starting out tend to think of the king as an annoyance, something that demands constant protection but gives very little back in the life and death battles that ultimately determines a game's result. This view is as wrong as wrong can be, and the following material shows you just how critically important the king is to success in chess. So use your king. In chess, the opening and middle game is a dangerous time for each side's king, both of them suffering from a wanted dead or alive mentality. The enormous threat of enemy pieces crashing through the center and mating one's king has led books and teachers to give the student a bit of excellent advice. Castle as quickly as possible, this gets out of the center and activates the rooks, and shield the needy monarch behind its pawns. Sadly, wisdom in one situation isn't always wisdom in another, and here Silman is perhaps teaching more about life than about chess. And what passes for correct opening and middle game strategy can often be wrong in the endgame. The truth is, the king is a very strong piece, at least as strong as a bishop or knight. Unfortunately, the terror created by the game's early phases causes most players to lose sight of these pieces' true worth. I just want to say what I'm thinking here. This guy is an international master. Like, there are levels to the game. Jeez. Anyways, the endgame poses very different problems and needs than the other phases. With minimal material remaining on the board, both players need to make use of everything they have left. Furthermore, in the endgame, pawns and kings take on enormous significance. Since the threat to the kings is no longer real, the enemy's limited army no longer poses any danger to His Majesty, both players should rush their king to the center of the board as quickly as possible. Let me repeat. Once the board clears of pieces, a player must make use of everything he has. The time has come for the king, which is finally safe from a possible assault by a large enemy force, to merge and lead the remains of his army to the final victory. The message here is very simple. When an endgame occurs, rush your king to the center of the board. Useful advice. In the endgame, pawns and the kings take on enormous significance. In general, when an endgame is reached, rush your king to the center of the board. Okay, this is all correct, obviously. Now it's gonna be interesting to see it applied in practice. Let's view. Let's continue. All right. And let's keep going. Understanding the king part 2. Okay. Because of the king's importance, the tournament E player, for example, these with a rating under 1200, needs to take the first steps in understanding the basic movements of the king and the white and black king's relation to each other. It is very important to look over the following examples again and again until the ideas are fully absorbed. And these endgames here, guys, are something that I myself have to calculate far ahead. Like, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if white wins or if black draws. I don't know. Well, if black draws, also white draws, but you know what I'm saying. I'm going to the gym. I'm very happy, you know. Today I trained. Today we did... What did we do? Today we did chest and triceps. It was very cool. Let's go. Okay. Anyways, but I should stay like this. I should stay, you know, with my... Not like this, but like this. Okay. Because of the king importance... okay. So, yeah, I was saying that I don't know these endgames. You think I am being fakely humble and virtue signaling, but little do you know, I actually don't know endgames. And when I say this is true. Anyways, to start, let's take a quick look at a critically important endgame that occurs all the time. Though white cannot mate with a king and lone pawn, he can promote his pawn to a queen. A rook will do, but why not go for the biggest gun possible? As a result of this fact, every king and pawn versus king situation is all about one thing: can the pawn promote? The position we have right here is a common one and shows a simple but intense battle. White wants a new queen, which will lead to an easy win, and black wants to stop this from happening, which will lead to a draw. So, king d6, king e4, king e6, d5, king d6, king d4, king d7, king e5, king e7, d6, king d7, king d5, king d8, king c6, king c8, d7, king d8, king d6, stalemate. Black managed to achieve his goal, a draw. But do you know how he did it? Could white have improved his play? To understand what was going on and what the moves for both sides meant, you need a basic knowledge of opposition. So let's leap into that subject, thoroughly master it, and then return to the position we had at the start of this sequence of moves. Let's go! This is actually useful for me as well. This is where I should start studying endgames, and this is what? This is... endgame for class E. So yeah, my endgame rating is around 1100. Let's do an average. I knew some basic, like I know how to checkmate with a king and queen against king and bishop and knight. I know that. I still have to think, but I know that. So it's like 1000, I know, but 1200 is a little bit a lot. So my rating in endgame is, objectively speaking, 1100. So there's just space for improvement. Let's go. You think I'm joking. It's just I'm smiling because that's funny. It's objectively funny, but you think I'm joking. Think whatever you want to think. Continue, line done. Okay, where is it? Here we go. So opposition. Let's go. The quest for domination between two opposing kings is called the opposition, whereby one king tries to become stronger than the other. This position illustrates the most basic and direct form of opposition. Of course, the absence of other material means that neither side can win. I'm just illustrating opposition here and nothing else. Both kings would like to advance and gain ground, and both kings have moved into a position that prevents the other from doing so. In such a situation, it is a disadvantage to have the move, since you must give up control of one of the blockade squares, shown by the 3 green circles in this position, and thus allow the opponent away into your position. Thus black to move would give white the power of the opposition, or, more simply put, the opposition. And see guys, this endgame is like... the endgame is really something by itself. Like, because if chess is counterintuitive, the endgame is counterintuitiveness itself. The endgame is crazy. And you guys, I think some of you genuinely think I'm over-dramatizing it. I'm not over-dramatizing it. There was a time, I'm going to tell you this story, it was a very simple endgame. It was like my king and 3-4 pawns on the same side, and my opponent's king and 3-4 pawns. And I was rated 1800, my opponent was rated 1900, and a strong candidate master 2000 and something was watching the game. And all of these ratings are FIDE. And we were playing the last round of an important local tournament, and my opponent pressed the whole game. Then somehow I managed to swindle it, I found some nice defensive resources. The game got really simplified, and we find each other in this endgame. And at some point we started to repeat. I felt it was a draw. My opponent felt it was a draw. He asked me the draw. He was the higher rated player, so he was the one that should ask. And I accepted it. And then we analyzed the game thoroughly, and we didn't even go to the final position, because all of 3 of us, we were like, yeah, that's obviously a draw. And again, it was a relatively simple endgame. We were talking about king and 4 pawns and king and 4 pawns on the same side, very simple. Then I put the game in an engine, and that final position that I draw, and my opponent thought it was a draw, and I thought it was a draw, and this candidate master watching, he thought it was a draw, it was completely winning for me. And to win that, all you had to do was to apply opposition. I think it was diagonal opposition. We are probably going to see it in a second here, or perhaps in the next chapters, but quite quickly, I'm sure. And plus there were some pawns. But the concept was actually very, very basic, elementary. And 3 strong players, very strong club players. One guy wasn't even club player, because when you are above 2000, you're technically like in the mastery realm, if that makes sense. So 2 strong club players and a candidate master, we didn't even consider it was winning. It's just, yeah, it's a draw, and we all 3 were completely wrong. So these concepts here, you think they're simple, but the fact that here the one that has the move has the disadvantage, to the human brain is crazy. It makes 0 sense. 0 sense. So you think I'm over dramatizing when I say that this is very advanced stuff? These are things that grandmasters make wrong, because it's about the human brain. The human brain doesn't work for chess endgames. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. But that's why studying endgames and having your mind that works in endgame logic, the endgame geometry, the piece geometry of the endgame, as I was saying, will give you such massive advantage. I am so excited I'm studying this, you have no idea. Let's go. So, okay, without breaking my keyboard... this keyboard has survived my bullet sessions, so it should survive an endgame study. Even though... So king c6. Poor black would like to say pass, but this luxury is denied him. Note that king e6 would have allowed white to make inroads with king to c5. And also, like, this endgame is so... Because, look, think about it. In this position here... King e6, king c5, it seems like you're gaining nothing because you are going towards the lateral side. But there are so many situations in the endgame where going towards the lateral side wins the game, because you're like doing a journey around the king, you're shouldering it and stuff like this. You'll see examples perhaps in much later chapters of this concept. The shouldering concept. is just everything around about the endgame is so counterintuitive, crazy. While king d7 allows white to advance and keep the opposition by king d5. This is perhaps the most normal. Like, obviously this is good, right? Because you're moving forward. And of course here there are just kings, but let's assume there are pawns in other places. Like, going forward is good, but also going to the lateral side, but still forward is crazy. But guys, don't panic, don't worry, don't lose your mind, hold on to your sanity, because we are here for that reason. So king c6, king e5. White has successfully penetrated into the enemy position. As you can see, owning the opposition often allows your king to make advances into enemy territory. While this means nothing in a barren king versus king situation, basic opposition and the need to effect penetration into the hostile camp has enormous importance in a pawn endgame. Remember the example I just gave you. Like, 3 strong players, compared to the average of course, couldn't figure it out, not even in a million years. Let's go back to our earlier king and pawn versus king position and study it more deeply. Okay, let's go. Very excited for that. But I have to go make myself lunch, bro. Well, not lunch, sorry, dinner. Opposition 2. Okay. In this initial position, right now we're playing black though. In this initial position, white has an extra pawn and also possesses the opposition. King's facing off with black to move. Sounds good for white, doesn't it? Yet the game is a dead draw if black stops the white king from penetrating to the front of its pawn. This can only be done by using the knowledge of gain of basic opposition. So king d6 here. Though not strictly necessary at this early stage, it shows good form and understanding of what eventually must be done to save the game. Rule: when your king has to step away from the pawn, always go straight back. Yeah, because this allows you, no matter what they do, to gain the opposition. And you may say, what if they check you? Well, if they check you, you just go back in front of the pawn, forcing them to go back and repeat the position, and at the end it's going to be stalemate. Which is what you saw in color reversed in the first example. Rule: okay, the easiest way to fathom the importance of king d6 is by looking at what happened after king to e6. Namely, king to e4, when white has the opposition. Compare this with the actual game continuation. So in the game, it's important to go back here. In the game, after king to d6 and king to e4, you have king e6. It seems that the position after king e6, king e4, and king d6, king e4, king e6 are the same. However, this isn't quite true. In the position after king to e6, king e4, it's black to move, and this means that white has the opposition. In the game continuation, which would be king d6, king e4, king e6, it's white to move, not black. Meaning that black has taken the opposition and stopped white's king from stepping past its pawn. Please ponder this small but subtle difference until the concept of opposition and the importance of who has the move completely sinks in. This is actually monumental. Rule: don't let white's king step in front of its pawn unless you have no choice. An important mistake that we will fully explore in part 3 is king to c6. From which position though? So king e4, okay, let's go to the beginning again, because again, I'm getting confused myself. As you can see, my endgame knowledge is not, I'm getting confused. So king d6, king e4, and here a mistake would be king c6. This let white's king move forward and step in front of its pawn by king to e5 when white wins. Again, you can jump ahead to part 3 if you want an immediate explanation of this. Well, what I can see is that if you go to d7, now there is d5, king d5, and this is opposition, but in white's favor, but white's king is in front of his pawn, and after you move, they are gonna get to e6. That's the concept of shouldering, I think. And if you go to d6, king d6, if you go to c8, king e7, you go to c7, d5, and the three squares are all covered. The king doesn't get to the pawn in time, and white wins. So, anyways, this doesn't work though with the rook pawns, but this is even more complex. Sorry guys, it was just to give you some context. I think that's useful. Moves like king to c7 blunder, king e5, king d7, king d5, that transposes, and king d7, king d5 also allow white to step in front of its pawn and should be avoided. Yeah. So king e4, king e6, d5. Retreating by king d3 or king e3 achieves nothing due to king d5. And if you imagine the white king being on d3, yeah, but you would have the opposition even, so there's no, okay. So you go king d6, once again stepping in front of the pawn and denying white's king access to the e5 square. Rule: when you can step in front of your opponent's pawn, do so. King d4, so as you can see here is white to have the opposition, but the king is behind his own pawn. And so you can go back, because if the pawn is behind the king and you go to d7, the king can follow you to d5. Whereas after you go to d7 now, the king cannot give you opposition because his own pawn is in the way, and if they push the pawn to free themselves, you just take it. And it's a draw easy. Well, by rule, by default. As shown previously, stepping to the side via king e7 allows white to take the opposition with king e5. You want to avoid that. So king d4, king d7, king e5. Nothing is to be gained by king e4 due to king d6. And again, they can get the opposition, but they have the pawn in front. That's not good. It doesn't matter. So king e5, king e7. Again, the opposition, so they have to play d6. If they go back, you just go back in front of the pawn. King d7, king d5. Black has three legal moves to choose from. One draws, two explode in black's face. Of course, king d8, of course. This is where things get serious. Now stepping to the side loses. King c8 allowed king c6, taking the opposition, and after king to d8, king d7, and we reach an enormously important situation. If it's black to move, as it is here, white wins. By the way, this is my input. This is also super counterintuitive. Like the fact that you move and you lose is crazy. But in endgames, this is the main theme. And we reach white wins. If it's black to move, as it is here, white wins. Because black is forced to step to the side with king e7, is the only legal move, and allow white to take ownership of the critical queening square on d8 with king to c7. Notice this is also lateral opposition, even though it's not important here. In the game, we reach this same position, except that white will have the move. So king d8 is important. Now they go to c6, the same thing they did, but now you have c8 and you have the opposition. And after d7 check, you go to d8. This is the same position as was reached in the note to black's 7 move. However, now it's white to move instead of black, and this means the game is drawn. White plays king d6 with an immediate stalemate. Of course, any other king move by white would have allowed king takes d7. Obviously, right, if they move the king anywhere else, which is not d6, they can't approach your king, so they're just going to lose the pawn. Take that pawn if they do it. Don't panic, take the pawn. Like, okay, oh no, I have to play it. What? Okay, so I guess I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna give them the opposition. Okay, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna go back, staying in front of the pawn. If they try to approach with the king, opposition, very simple. In front of the pawn, I just stay in front of the pawn unless they approach with the king. In that case, I give the opposition. And here I have to go here, otherwise I lose. So this is GG. Okay, I successfully defended. Let's go. Woohoo! Okay. Rook pawns 1. Oh, 1, 2, 3. Okay. There are three lines, and then there are the tests. That's gonna be quite simple, I guess. So let's go. Okay, now we are talking about rook pawns, which means the pawns that are on the lateral side where the rooks are positioned in the first position on the board. I'm gonna drink a little bit. In most endgames, the presence of rook pawns, A pawns or H pawns, gives the defending side drawing chances that normally would not exist. The reason for this resides in the diminished activity of any king that steps in front of such pawn, since the king can now only move towards the center of the board. Going the other way would make the poor monarch fall off the edge of the board. Yeah, that's not possible. This diminished activity allows many stalemate possibilities that simply don't occur with other pawns. In this position, white to move would win if he possessed any other pawn but a rook pawn. However, the fact that it's an H pawn ensures an easy draw. H7, and normally black would be forced to step to the other side of the pawn, allowing the white king to step forward and take control of the all-important queening square, as illustrated in the next example. However, because the blasted thing is an H-pawn, the game ends in an immediate stalemate. Rule: king and rook pawn versus lone king. If the defender's king gets in front of the pawn, the game will always be a draw. Okay, now, we're talking about rook pawn here. Now, here's the thing. This is why Capablanca used to say you should study endgame first. Of course, he's just, maybe he never even said it, but there is a reason behind it. It's because if you think about it, in chess, they tell you that the central pawns are more valuable than the lateral pawns. There are many reasons for it. Of course, they help you control the center, which by itself give you control of the game, and yada, yada, yada. But another reason is that the lateral pawn, the very lateral pawn, if you're able to win a lateral pawn, meaning you have a lateral pawn, your opponent doesn't, and everything else gets erased except for the kings, that's a draw. Of course, it depends where the kings are and where the pawn is compared to them, but in theory, okay, with rational positioning of the two monarchs, meaning the black king is where it should be, the white king is where it should be, and the lateral pawn is on the starting square, let's say, that's just a draw. Okay? So this kind of help you also make middle game decisions. There are sometimes situations where you can take with the H pawn, let's say a bishop that traded, or with the F pawn, and you're like, do I open the F file? Well, if you are more on the beginner side, you may say, yeah, let's open the F file, let's create some attack with the rook, right? But if you're more nuanced, more advanced, you may say, let's take with the H pawn. Let's move one pawn towards the center to perhaps in an endgame create something, you know? And of course, these are just general things. There are positions where you have to be concrete, which is like literally every position, but hopefully you got the point of what I'm trying to say. So study endgames give you really superpowers. Okay, rook pawns 2. Let's look at the same position pushed one file to the left. As in the previous position, it's white to move. However, though this led to an immediate draw when white had an H pawn, the fact that the pawn is now on the G file gives white instant victory. G7, again, is white to move. Black to move will draw since he can retain opposition. King F8, opposition, G7 check, King G8, King G6 is stalemate. Okay, we saw from the previous line with color reversed. Chess is so hard if you're a beginner, it's unbelievable. Like, the fact that I'm more advanced now than I used to be, it makes studying this so much easier. So much easier. For you, if you're a beginner, studying this is probably a nightmare. So I'm with you. Keep pushing. You don't have to follow the whole course because I'm going and going and going because I'm advanced. My average rating of my chess skills is like 1900 FIDE and something. That's why I can push myself here. But if your overall rating, your actual rating is like 1500, you should just reach the chapter of 1500. So chill. Anyways, g7, king h7. Here we are talking about it's white to move with the pawn, not very lateral, but just one step. So on the g file. Okay, g7, king h7. Here we see the difference. With the h-pawn, black's king could not step to the right. Here he can, and that proves to be his undoing. King f7, and there's no way to stop the promotion. Grabbing control over the queening square, king h6, g8 equals queen, noticing how this is not stalemate, because the king has the h5 square to run through, and after queen to h5, the puzzle, let's call it, is gonna end here. However, if you want to practice your checkmate with queen and king skills, it continues. Queen g3, the box. The most accurate move, white forces black's king to step back towards the white ruler, and now queen h4 is checkmate. If you are wondering what about queen g6, that's also correct, that's also checkmate, that's fine. So queen h4 was simply chosen by the author here. Mate. In general, if you are defending a king and pawn endgame, the presence of rook pawns enormously increases your chances for a successful drawn result. Okay, which is also counterintuitive if you think about it. In chess, you play for a win, but in endgames, you may want to play for a draw. And you have to be as motivated as to play for the win, because that's a win in that circumstance. So very tough. Okay, so here we move the pawn, they go here, we move the pawn again, they go here. If we promote to a queen, is it stalemate? No, they can go here, otherwise we could have considered promoting to a rook, but there is no need. We promote to a queen, and that's solved. If they went here, of course, there is the checkmate thing. Okay, now we sum it up, guys, and then we solve the puzzles, and then I go make myself the dinner, and I'm gonna close the video. I'm happy because I took one recording, one take, so I don't have 3 trillion pieces of media scattered around like I had in part 1. And funnily enough, while I'm recording this, I still have to edit part 1. So you're gonna see this in a while. But tomorrow I don't go to the gym because it's resting day, and so I have a little bit more time. Okay, summing up. 2 nights, I have to stay, talking about the gym, guys, I have to stay up. Maybe I'm gonna take an improved version of this chair. Sorry, lady, but, you know, my lady here, my chair is a little bit... Anyways, so... 2 knights versus long king is a draw. Okay? Since the vast majority of blunder mates in this endgame occur in the corners, make sure you dance away from them and or away from the enemy king whenever possible, and you'll be completely safe. Okay, it was a little bit difficult for me to read this sentence in English, but I made it. Queen versus bishop, no pawns for either side, or queen versus knight, no pawns for either side, is easily winning for the queen. True, we saw it. The king is a strong piece and must be used in the endgame. The opposition is an extremely important tool that allows one king to become stronger than another. 4. Rook pawns add to the defender's drawing chances in most endgames. True, all true, all true. There's not much to say rather than all true. There are facts here and nothing else. Silman here not only speaks English, he also speaks facts. Okay, so there are 5 tests. Let's just solve them and then I'm gonna close. Okay, does white have anything to worry about? Well, he has to worry about not hanging the queen from the bishop. Right? However, we can check on a2. Well, actually, we can also check here. That's perhaps even better. I'm just trying to figure out a way to do it even better. We can also go to a6, and there is no stalemate, and then we are going to go to b7. However, if we go to a6, they're gonna play bishop to b4, but then we check them here. Because if we take a stalemate, so I'm just trying to figure out what's the best move to this guy here is. There is also queen g2 that could actually be the best move. Yeah, queen g2, the king goes here, and then it's just checkmate. Yeah, I'm just gonna go. I suspect that this is the move they recommend, but I'm just gonna go here. Yeah, let's see if they recommend this. Oh, they don't recommend this? Okay, what do they recommend then? Is there a mate in one that I'm missing? This is not mate in one. They can interpose, and then it's checkmate here. Or interpose and I take them. Okay, this is the move. And here, yeah, this is checkmate. A little bit of a wild geometry. I'm gonna try to read... you guys can't fully see the board, but like, come on, you understand what's being talked about here. I know the king is a little bit cut off and it may trigger you because you're autistic schizo like me, but don't worry, is the board. Does white have anything to worry about? Queen h8. A queen easily overpowers a poor bishop. In this position, white has many ways to end the game. However, most face certain stalemate potholes. Queen h8 check is a good move. Queen g7 is another good move. Bishop c7, queen takes c7 is a blunder. This is stalemate. Always make sure your opponent has a legal move and this won't happen to you. Instead, king takes c7, giving black's king the a7 square. Mate was the way to go. King a6, which is something that we looked at, threatens queen b7 mate. Bishop b4, this is the line that we saw. Queen b4 stalemate. Why didn't white ask, if I hit the bishop, what can my opponent do? If white had posed this simple question, he would have instantly seen that queen takes b4 was a move to avoid. One of many sufficient alternatives was queen h8, bishop f8, queen takes f8. This is a line we saw throughoutly. There's also queen g2 check, which is the line that I wanted to play. By playing on light squares, white avoids any trick by the enemy bishop. And after king b8, queen b7 is checkmate. If you're a beginner, this is an extremely useful exercise of like board vision. This is very useful exercise. Like to see queen h8, queen h1 is insane board vision. Like congratulations if you solve this. This is actually, for a beginner, this is ultra advanced. I'm talking like real beginner, of course. So queen h8, bishop b8, queen h1. Mate ends the game in a happier way than queen c8. Why would you play queen c8 though? I understand that is an educational example, but why would anyone play queen c8? I understand the other ones, but this was just crazy. When the games ends via stalemate and a draw, bro. Since black can't legally move his king or his bishop. This is funny because queen c8 is just made for the example, you know, it's like nobody plays queen c8 here. If anything, they go back all the way here, then they get checked, and then they check, and then he's made, so, which is fine. Okay, as in all endgames, stalemates play an important part in the defender's hopes and must always remain in the stronger side minds as something to avoid at all cost. Okay, let's exit this, and let's try to solve the test number 2. Is king f3 a good move? You guys decide. Okay, king f3 is a terrible move because it allows this fork. So we have to find something else. I don't know what this something else is though. I really don't know. Yeah, king f3 again is bad. What do I play though? Can I play king e2? I'll play king e2. Okay. No king f3. The reason I played king e2, if you're wondering, because you may be thinking, let's say you're a beginner, you're watching this and you're like, why did you play king e2 and why not some queen move? The reason is, remember what I said about, I can't draw arrows, but when the king and the knight are distanced one square, like there is a square diagonally in the middle, or they are 1-2 squares away if you prefer it, depends how you look at it. that's the situation where it takes the knight the most amount of moves to give another check. So is a general endgame principle, but even a late middle game principle or complex endgame principle, to put your king in this geometrical situation with a knight, because that's the hardest way for them to check you. And that's why I played this move. If you play this move, you go very safe. And so I just played this, and if it gave me alternative, I would just keep thinking, right? But okay, king e2 is correct. No king f3 allows black to draw by knight e5, forking the king and queen. Though black will end up a whole knight to the good, a lone knight can't mate, and so the game must be abandoned as a draw. In a queen versus knight endgame, there are only two ways the stronger side can blow it. Stalemate or missing a knight fork. If you have the side with the queen, simply use some care and make sure neither of these possibilities occur. And this goes back to the principle of being patient. Again, I'm talking for real beginners here, but like, be patient, guys, okay? No rush. What matters is the result. Be patient. Okay. Ooh, where should black move his king? Again, you guys can take your moments to solve this. And I highly recommend you guys, if you are somebody that has followed everything so far, like everything, you should probably buy this course, because, like, first of all, it's fair to the people that work behind it, right? We are technically breaking copyright laws here, so you should buy the course if you're watching these many amount of time. But also, like, I'm gonna do this at my level. I'm not gonna do this for the exercises, but at my level, I'm going to repeat this exercise and the chapters numerous times, of course. So you want to have them to be able to play them with the spaced repetition. Anyways, here I have to go here. So if they advance, I give them the opposition. It's very simple. Okay, so king d8. If you didn't instantly play this move, go back and read over the material that covers this endgame. Remember, the defender must keep his king in front of the enemy pawn, and when it does have to move, it should go straight back so it can take the opposition when the other king moves forward. Okay, of course. King e6, king e8, taking the opposition and stopping the white king from moving forward. d7 check, or king e5, king d7, king d5. This may scare you. Again, endgames are so counterintuitive. Here white technically is giving you the opposition, but it doesn't matter, because after you play king d8, they can't move forward. Their piece prevents them to keep the opposition. So getting the opposition is cool, but if you can't keep it, doesn't matter. And that's why here it doesn't matter, and it's okay to allow it. So d7 check, king d8, king d6. Again, they get the opposition, but this time there is stalemate. So it's good. Okay, and now the last puzzle. No, the close to last puzzle. Which king move is correct? We are playing black. Technically, both moves are correct, because he's an h-pawn. To make it really educational, I'm gonna play the didactical move, which is in front of the pawn, but also the other one is correct. Normally, the defender always wants to go straight back with his king in such situations. However, if he is facing a rook pawn, then it doesn't matter. Either move suffice for a draw. King h8 will show good form, but here you simply can't go wrong. King g8, king g6, king h8. And if they push, everyone in the room will know that the fix was in if black played king to f8. Where is that king going? Because h7 forces resignation. h7, yeah, here we are in this line here, after king here, king h8, h7. If this were any other pawn, other than another rook pawn, white would win, because black king will have to step to the other side of the pawn. However, since there is not another side to the pawn, the game is drawn by stalemate. So hopefully you guys are understanding these concepts. Again, I'm 1970 FIDE, and I have no problem repeating these things. So if you are lower rated than that and you think that repeating this is stupid or something, maybe it's that attitude that have kept you at lower level. You should be a little bit more student mindset. Can white win? No, but we have to be careful. So I'm clicking on the king here. I'm cheating because I'm tired. and it seems to me that these moves are not playable, so I have to go here, and it doesn't even allow me to play it out. That's fine. Knight b1, can white win? My answer was no. King a2, no. In fact, two knights can't win against correct defense. King c2, two pieces up, and white has black king cornered. Incredibly, it's still a draw. Now, the reason why he goes into the corner is because he's forced. You can't go up. You have to go to this square, because these two squares are controlled by the two knights and the king. Okay, king a1, knight b3. On knight c3, that would be immediately a stalemate because a2 is not available anymore. And king a2. Okay, let's show it. Let's show it, guys. Knight c3, of course, the king can't move. Okay, so instead knight b3. But king a2, now you're stepping out of the corner. Knight to d2. And again, you have only one move, which is king a1, but they cannot geometrically do it. And white can't put his opponent away. And that would be a draw. Okay, fine. Okay, we did the puzzles. Let's just go through the final thoughts. Final thoughts. Mastering these easy-to-learn endgames has given you your first taste of serious endgame theory. For real. Knowing what can and can't mate is must-known information, while a basic knowledge of the opposition is crucial if you wish to thrive in the arena of players rated over 1000. These set up the foundation for the far more complex endgames you'll be learning as your overall chess strength continues to rise. And again, before closing the video, I want to remind you of the story I told you. Choose strong first-class category player against and one strong candidate master. All of three couldn't figure out an extremely simple endgame. So we're talking about a king and 4 pawns each on the same side. But because of the opposition concept, even though it was diagonal opposition in that instance, but still, you'll see in a couple of chapters at best, it's a relatively simple concept that as well, and we just couldn't do it. Endgames are really counterintuitive, and study them correctly with method like we are doing here with Silman's book is really gonna step up your game, guys. And if it doesn't help you right now to gain rating right now, I guarantee you that it will one day, for sure. There's gonna be one day before or after that you're gonna find yourself in some tough endgames and you're gonna have the better of it because of this knowledge. Also, a defeat in an endgame, already a defeat is painful, but a defeat in an endgame is much more painful than any other defeat, because if you get defeated in an endgame, you've probably played quite a lot, so it's tough. So this endgame study also saves you a lot of mental health, really. Okay, so the chapter's done, hard work pays off, of course it does. And let's go. Before you know it, we are 1/10 through the whole course. 51 out of 500, basically. 498. And we did the first part, Endgames for Beginners, and we did part 2, Endgames for Class E. Now, again, before closing, sorry, but I have to say these things, they are important. The Endgames for Beginners, like the unrated to 999, is pure, okay, ladder, very simple. Already what we did in part 2, it's quite important because, and I'm not talking about the queen against bishop and knight, that's also important, but relatively, but the opposition thing is really, really, really important. If you have Dvoretsky book, which I have, there are the examples, the tragicomedies, which is basically situations where grandmasters, I repeat, grandmasters, threw away games, whether they drew winning positions or lost winning positions or anything in between, because they misplayed extremely simple endgames with extremely simple concepts. And usually 99% of these cases is around some mistaken calculation revolving around the concept of opposition. Whether it's the simple opposition, whether it's the diagonal opposition, whether it's the shouldering, which is a little bit more complex, nuanced version of the opposition. The core of it is almost always the opposition. So if even Grandmaster make mistakes there, this is crucial. So I'm very happy we did it. If you guys want to go over this chapter again, go buy the courses on Chessable. You just type in Silman, or you go on the courses Endgames, and it's just one of the first that comes out. And that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for watching this. I'll see you in part 3 of this beautiful series with, what a coincidence, part 3 of the course, which is Endgames for Class D players. I see that there are 32 variations, but they are more advanced than the previous 2 chapters, so there are 32 heavy variations. It's gonna be fantastic. I'm probably gonna do that in 2 videos. But yeah, it's gonna be amazing. Are you ready to master your endgames? Because I am. Thank you guys so much for watching. Enjoy your chess.